Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
Well, cheers, everybody. I don't know what time it is in your land, but in mine, it's actually 7 a.m. And I'm starting the day with a beautiful glass of champagne because that's what I love to write about. And you'll see in the back, I've got my grapes going. And I love to write about the women who actually revolutionized champagne. But first, let me tell you a little bit about me. Right now, I am sitting in front of a beautiful vineyard in Sonoma, California, where I live. And I live on a lavender farm for those of you who love lavender. So it's been 30 years now. We have lived on the lavender farm and done lavender products. So Sonoma Lavender is one of the largest lavender producers in the country, actually the largest. That my life is all lavender and wine, and I write about it. So we're going to get into the Champagne Widows series, which will be several books, but right now this is the first one, Champagne Widows, and the second one, Madame Pommery. And they're about the real women who made the biggest brands going today. This is Veuve Clicquot. I'm sure you've seen it in stores and at restaurants. This woman, which I'm going to be reading about, is from 1800s, and women could not even own businesses at that point. And here she was creating a winery, and it's one of the biggest today. And then the second book is Madame Pommery, and I love this label. And this is one of the more affordable champagnes, which is about $55 a bottle. And that's expensive, but we have to remember that champagne takes twice as much work to make as wine. And that's why it's so expensive. So, with having said that, I'm going to read you a small excerpt from Champagne Widows, and that is the Veuve Clicquot who really started the ball rolling. And this scene is where she discovers that she has a curse or a gift called l'année, the nose. And she has gone down with her grandmère, her grandmother, who's very, very old, into the criers that are under all of Champagne. And they're wonderful. If you get a chance to see them, you have to go. So these caves are all under the land of Champagne, and that's where they store the wine now. But in 1800, they hadn't figured that out. So here we are down in the caves. Grandmère places a bunch of grapes in my hands and brings it to my nose. What comes to you? The grapes smell like ripening pears and a hint of hawthorn berry. She chortles and replaces the grapes with another bunch. What about these? Drawing the aroma to the top of my palate, I picture gypsies around the campfire, smoky, deep, and complex. Grilled toast and coffee? Her next handful of grapes are sticky and soft, the aroma so robust and delicious, my tongue longs for a taste. Those smell like chocolate-covered cherries. Grandmère wheezes with a rasp and a rattle that scares me. I yank off the blindfold. Grandmère, you are ready. She slides me a wooden box carved with vineyards and women carrying basket of grapes on their heads. Open it. Inside lays a gold taste-of-in, a wine tasting cup with a long, heavy chain. Your great-grandpère, Louis Ruinart, used this cup to taste wine with the monks at Hauteville Abbey. Just by smelling the grapes, he could tell you the slope of the hill on which they grew, the exposure to the sun, and the minerals in the soil. She closes her papery eyelids and inhales. Your great grandpère was Linné, the nose. He passed down this precious gift to you. Ah, here she goes again with her crazy notion. Maman says Linné is a curse. Grandmère clucks her tongue. Your maman didn't inherit Linné, so she doesn't understand it. It's a rare and precious gift smelling the hidden essence of things. I took it for granted, and now it's gone. Her wrinkled hand picks up the gold taste-of-in and christens my nose. A prickling clusters in my sinuses like a powerful sneeze that won't release. I wish there was truth to Grandma's ramblings. It would explain so much about my finicky nature. You are Lene, Barbara Nicole. She lifts the chain over my head, and the cup nestles above my breast. You must carry on Grandpère Ruinart's gift. Holding her bandaged head, Grandmère keens incoherently. The lantern casts a monstrous shadow on the Crier wall. Her tasting game has become a nightmare. Let's get you back to your room. I try to walk her up the stairs, but her legs give out. Lifting her bird-like body in my arms, I carry her as she carried me as a child, trying not to topple over into the Crier. Promise me you'll carry on, Lene, she says. My dear grandmère is dying in my arms. Now I know that Lene is a curse. Promise me. Her eyelids flutter and close. I won't let you down, grandmère, I whisper. She feels light in my arms, but the gold taste-of-in feels heavy, oh, so very heavy around my neck.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Minds of Authors. Happy brand new season. We're back 2024. This is going to be an amazing year. We're kicking off the season. It's now becoming a tradition. We're kicking off our season with back to back, a full week of brand new authors and amazing episodes just for you guys. I am so excited to be back. This is so much fun. I have incredible authors, incredible books to introduce you all. So if you're new to the podcast, go ahead and subscribe. We're in all major networks, so you can get us anywhere, to include my YouTube channel as well as my website, so you don't want to miss it. I hope you guys enjoy that reading as much as I did, because we're going to jump in. Let's start our show. Hello, Ms. Rebecca. How are you?
Hey, how are you? Cheers. I've got my little glass of champagne. Cheers to everyone.
Salut, salut. I don't have champagne. I just have some water. It's a little early and I'm still dehydrated. So we're going to start with water. I love that every time I interview you, you have champagne going and in the most gorgeous glasses. So I'm like, yes, holding it down. I love it.
I have a champagne glass collection, and this one is a Waterford. And I only buy two of them. And if one breaks, fine. Then I move on and I buy another set. So you can always afford maybe two of a beautiful glass.
Oh, I love that theory. That is such a good idea. Miss Rebecca, your collection has fascinated me to a whole degree because you're doing historical fiction from something that we take for granted. Let's talk champagne, because the history, the stories, and everything about it, I had no clue. I'm like, what? Women were making champagne back in the day. I need to know, and our listeners need to know, how did you stumble upon this and what made you decide to write these books? Tell us.
As I said, I live in wine country. I'm watching the sunrise right now over the vineyards, and it's so beautiful. So I have been obsessed with all things wine, actually, but champagne especially. And when we travel to Champagne in France, and by the way, you probably know that if you call something champagne, it has to come from France. That's the only place. Prosecco's from Italy. We have sparkling wine. This is the sparkling wine from California, but only champagne can come from Champagne. So when we visited there, I found out about Veuve Clicquot, and Veuve Clicquot just fascinated me because she was a rich person, very rich. Her father had a factory, a wool factory with 1,000 employees. I can't believe that. So in 1800, and she's rich, why does she decide to make a business that she's not allowed to do? And how did she do that? And then she becomes the biggest brand in the world. So, how does that all happen during that time? And not only that, but her family was involved with Napoleon Bonaparte because her father was the mayor of Reims, which is the capital of Champagne. And so he had to report to Napoleon. And of course, Champagne was a treasure in those days and still today for France. And so Napoleon forbid any champagne to leave the country because he was waging war on all the other countries in Europe for 15 years. And so here she is making a champagne company, and she can't even export it out of her country. And no one in France could afford it because of these wars. He was taking all the money. So actually, this book is fantastic because it's a war between Veuve Clicquot and Napoleon. And guess who wins? We know what happened to Napoleon. He actually got ousted from the country and they put him on an island. And so this is very funny because she figures out how to export her champagne. I'll give you this little story. She exports it by hiring an American ship. So she's disguised and she crates all the champagne in coffee and chocolate crates that say they're from Germany. And she sails right through all of Napoleon's blockade. So that's a little hint, but it's really fun to have found out about her battle, not only in making champagne those days. Here we're looking at a bottle, and this gets manufactured, right? But in those days, they blew the bottles by their mouth. So making glass bottles that wouldn't necessarily hold up to the pressure that happens in champagne making. So I just love that story.
I am so like infatuated with everything and fascinated by the fact that there's so much richness into this. It's not just they're making liquor. That's not just the essence. It's a small revolution on a female enterprise that wasn't supposed to happen. They're not supposed to get out of the country. There's so many knots, not. And still, it's like the power of ingenuity all coming together to just say, this is what we're doing. So I love it.
Unusual is that a lot of times you hear stories of people who don't have a lot and they figure out how to get it together and succeed. But this is a story of a woman who had everything. And so why did she have to buck the system and do her own thing? And this idea that she had the curse, Lene, that's what started me getting very excited. And that's a true fact that she had a special talent in her nose that she could smell what the minerality was of all the different soils and make this incredible wine. So I loved that part that it all came from a curse or a gift as, as different people saw it. So Madame Pommery lived in the same town and 50 years later, Veuve Clicquot, she had turned the company over. So she wasn't really in the picture, but then Madame Pommery had a whole different story. She was 40 years old when she was widowed. And by the way, the reason the series is called Champagne Widows is because that is the loophole that women could own a business if they were a widow because they had to support themselves and their families. So all of a sudden, at 40 years old, Madame Pommery becomes a widow and she has to support her family. And she doesn't have all the money that Veuve Clicquot had. And her husband also was in the wool business because that's what they did, raise sheep and make wool and make clothing and such. And she decides to get in the business and she had never been in business before. So at 40 years old, she decides, I'm going to learn how to do this and I'm going to do it. Of course, the men in town wanted nothing to do with teaching her how to make champagne, like get out of our way. And still, a woman could not own a business until she was a widow. So, being a widow, she had the ability to do that. What she did to revolutionize champagne is Veuve Clicquot made sweet champagne. That was what it was in those days. Very, very sweet. It was a dessert wine, and that's what they had. Whereas Pommery decided to make dry champagne called Brut, and as you know, that's what the world drinks today. We only drink Brut pretty much, unless you're really choosing a sweet champagne. But so she was the first person to make Brut champagne. And she did it. In fact, all the men that were making champagne said it tastes like razor blades going down her throat. They were totally mean and didn't like it. So I love the fact that she was going to make a new recipe and that she becomes this success around the world making brut champagne. She too, by the way, has to fight a Napoleon, but it's Napoleon III, who is the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. And he waged war with Germany at the same time that Madame Pommery is making her champagne. And guess who should come and occupy Madame Pommery's home but the general of the German army? I know you can't make this stuff up. So, this is a different genre of historical fiction. It's taking real people who have amazing stories and bringing them to life so we don't forget their stories. And I always write about women who've done extraordinary things. So, she was making champagne. She has the general of the Prussian German army living in her home, occupying all of Rheims, and they're drinking all of her champagne. So, what does she do? She goes to the city dump, which is on a big hill, and she digs tunnels under the city dump to the Criers, and she hides all her champagne under there so they can't get to it.
That is fascinating and insane because you're going, I have a business. I'm trying to make money because I'm a widow. And here comes this people and just drink my profit. What is
Right.
what is this woman to do?
I love it. And then not only that, but she makes a headquarters under there for the French resistance army to fight the Germans. The Germans occupied all of France for 2 years, and she lived through that part. I don't even know where these women come from who can do all this. When I really get into their history, it makes me appreciate that my life is easier, easier than theirs was, and they survived.
I have a huge appreciation for the fact that they struggle and made it because I realize I'm a little wuss. I don't want to be in that time frame. I'm not going to make it. I know this.
Yeah, I know it trivializes the things we have to go through, but the world is a big scary place, and these women sometimes, I mean, especially right now, the wars that are going on, but they had to live with it every day because actually we had way more wars in those days in the 1800s than we do today. Today we're like astounded that we're still at war, but they had to live with it as a daily occurrence.
One of the things you mentioned, that history portion is so huge. But you also mentioned the fact that you wanted to bring these stories to life so people didn't forget them. So it wasn't creating characters and put it in a time period. It is bringing real life stories back into the front of our minds and making us remember them in such a beautiful way. So I appreciate that.
Well, that genre is called biographical historical fiction. And I want to tell you, because I'm super excited, it won't last forever, but Madame Pommery is number one in that category on Amazon, number one. And Champagne Widows is number two. So that's pretty fun for me that people are responding to that story.
Oh, congratulations. Absolutely. We want people to connect with our characters, but when the characters are based on real people and you're able to still tell their story, it's such a huge accomplishment. So, madam, congratulations because this is a series. Are you working on the next one? What is next on your plate?
I am working on the next one, which is a totally different story. I think that's what's exciting is that this is a series, but each story is a standalone completely about a different time period in history. And the next one is about Bollinger, Lily Bollinger. And she brought such glamour to champagne. She brought her champagne, Bollinger champagne, into 007 movies. So all that champagne that they're drinking as James Bond. She did that. She was a fashionista, so she was best friends with the Vogue editor. She was at the front row of the Paris shopping week. So I am really excited to get into that.
That sounds really exciting because we need to know when that book comes out. How much research do you do every time you create a book?
Takes a lot of research. And I start with the winery itself. Lucky for me, each of the wineries I'm writing about has a historian. And so they can share with me all their company history. But funny enough, they don't have as much as I need and want. So then you have to get into the genealogies of people to find out who they really married. And I think a strange thing that I've discovered is that history is really fluid because there are different versions of what happened. Just like today, you could tell a story and I could tell a story about the same event, and people tell it completely differently because they have a different point of view. So I'm finding that even in solid history that it's different. For instance, in Pommery, oh, this is a funny story. I'm going to tell you a different story. Is that researching Pommery, I had the whole book written, and then I led a group to a tour of Champagne, and we went to a beautiful Art Nouveau house. And they said that this man who built this house was the assistant of Madame Pommery and that they had a 30-year affair. Well, the Pommery historian never told me that, and I even asked about him. His name is Henry Vasnier, and I asked about him because they were together for so long. This Henry Vasnier was very important, and then I find out from a different historian that they had this affair. So I had to go back and rewrite the whole darn book.
I enjoy how well you handle that. It's like, I'm just going to go back and fix the book. Because some people would have been like, what do I do now? How do I handle this? You was just like, okay, let's go back and add this to this book.
It's more exciting, right? I already had Henry Vasnier in the book. I just didn't know that they were having an affair. And he was like 15 years younger than her in 1850. So this was kind of a big deal, and that they never told anybody. Meanwhile, they built this incredible Art Nouveau home that years later, everyone is going through and finding out that they were together.
That's such a fun twist. And
I
it
love
gives you a really great romantic interest that you're going, really? Okay.
The worst thing is I already had her having like an affair with her Scottish noble because she went to finishing schools and she knew these Scottish nobles. So I already had that going. What was I going to do with him? So I had to kind of start with him, finish him off because she really is falling in love with her assistant.
So much fun and so much drama. And you still just pulling from history. Absolutely enjoy it. Tell me, madam, what advice would you give an up and coming author who decides, I want to tackle biographical historical fiction? Where do they start?
Well, I think you have to read every book. When I write a book, I have to read probably 10 different books and plus all the research that's available online, and then track down any firsthand knowledge that is there, like the actual history. So you have to do all that beforehand so that you are very knowledgeable once you start your story. That's fun. You just are reading books and underlining and a million post-its throughout the book. Then you have enough real history. And then while you're writing the book, you have to keep referring to those things that you found out. But at least you understand and love that character and what they were going through. And then I would say the biggest advice is write every day at least 2 hours, because if you don't, you lose the thread of your story. you lose what you're trying to say. And right now, I'm writing a different novel, not of this series. And I find that if I don't write it every day, I'm like, where was I now? And what is she feeling? And all this stuff. So you have to stick with it. What about you?
I'm very much of a plotter. So when it comes to writing, I am all in or all out. That's kind of the catch. If I'm in the middle of a book, I'm consumed by that book till it's done. And I can't switch books or else my mind is like, I have no idea where I'm at. So yes, to that extent, once I'm starting writing, I am definitely in the book.
Yeah. Well, I took a little break from this series because I was writing about champagne for 5 years. And so I wanted to take a break and go back to another series that I had. It kind of gave me a palate cleanser for the next one. But I am getting very excited about writing the next one. But I wanted that kind of built up energy before I jump in.
I do the same. I have to switch between genres or else I tend to burn myself out and then I don't want to go back to it.
Exactly. Like this one I'm writing now is a thriller and it's a split personality. So it's a completely different world from what I did here. So that's fun. And you'll
Whew,
look forward to getting to the other.
so exciting. So, Miss Rebecca, tell us, where can our listeners find you? Where can they learn more about you? Where are you located online? Tell us.
Okay. It's Rebecca-Rosenberg.com. That's my website. And it has so much good info on it. It has reader's guides that you can download for free and all that. And then you can find the books at Amazon or anywhere that you can order them from any bookstore. But Amazon is the easy place to do it.
Ooh, to our listeners, you need to go check out this series. Follow Miss Rebecca. Join her newsletter so you can keep up with all the amazing things she has going on. Miss Rebecca, before you leave us, are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
Easy peasy. Don't think too much about this. Cold drinks are hot.
Sparkling. Well, them sparkling.
I'm not even surprised. I like it. Home cooked meals or restaurant.
I really cook a lot. I cook a lot, but I like both, but I cook a
Okay.
lot.
Beach or lake.
Beach.
Nice. Cats or dogs.
Dogs. Couldn't you just hear mine squealing outside?
So here's a little different one. Let's see how you do with this one. If your life had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. The Impossible Dream. You
Ooh.
know that? That's the Don Quixote, The Impossible Dream.
I love it. Miss Rebecca, it has been such a pleasure having you on this show. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
Oh, thanks for listening. And I hope you'll check out the Champagne Widows books.
To our listeners, go ahead. Give Miss Rebecca a shout. Check out the series. You are going to love it. If you're new to the podcast, remember to subscribe. We have amazing authors coming up. And because we're doing back to podcast celebration in this amazing February, we'll have another fabulous author tomorrow. So you don't want to miss out. Give us some love, share with everybody, and I'll see you again, you guys, tomorrow. Bye.